Hello students, welcome to my channel Quick Learning with Seema. I'm Dr. Seema and today I've come up with a new video on rocks. But before that, if you are not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe to it, give a like button to the video and share the video amongst your friends. So let's get started. What is rock? Rock has been defined as a aggregate of minerals, and these rocks they form the earth crust. Rocks not only mean the hard solid material, but it also comprises of the loose particles. So rocks comprises of both the solid material and the loose particles, and rocks they don't have any definite chemical composition. So rock is an aggregate of the minerals which includes the solid particles as the loose particles. They forms the earth crust and they do not have a definite chemical composition. Now we'll learn what are the differences between rocks and minerals. Rocks, as I said, it is aggregate of the minerals, whereas minerals they are the solid inorganic compounds that occur naturally within the earth crust. Rocks do not have a definite chemical composition, whereas minerals they have a definite chemical compositions. Minerals organize to form rocks, whereas elements they organize to form the minerals. So minerals are formed from the elements, and minerals organize to form the rocks. So rocks form from the minerals and minerals are formed from the elements. There are three types of rocks: igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks, and metamorphic rocks. Minerals, they are of four types, or you can say they have been divided into four groups: silicates, carbonates, sulfides, and metallic. Now we'll learn what are the different types of rocks. So on the basis of the origin, the rocks have been classified into three types: igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks, and metamorphic rocks. Igneous, they are the primary rocks; sedimentary rocks, they are the secondary rocks; and metamorphic rocks, they are formed as a result of the heat and the pressure which is created in the earth crust and also in the interior of the crust. Igneous rocks, first we'll know about igneous rocks. Igneous rocks, they have been derived, the word igneous has been derived from the Latin word ignis, which means fire. As I said, they are the primary rocks because they are formed first on the earth, and the igneous rocks, they are formed due to cooling, solidification, and crystallization of the hot molten material, which is usually known as magma. So they have been formed by the process of the cooling, solidification, and crystallization of the hot molten material known as the magma. Now, the chemical composition of the igneous rocks varies from aluminum to silicate to quartz to feldspar, etc. And that is why they are known as sialic rocks. Now, characteristics of the igneous rocks. First characteristic is they are hard and compact. since they are formed from the cooling, solidification, and the crystallization of the hot molten material. So they are very hard, they are solid and compact. They are crystallized a form of rocks, as I said earlier, and they are least affected by the weathering because water does not percolate. वाटर जो है वो percolate अंदर तक नहीं जाता है इन रॉक्स में, इसी वजह से ये इन पर weathering का इफेक्ट बहुत कम होता है. weathering या वेदरिंग जो भी आप प्रोनाउंसिएट करना चाहें, वेदरिंग एक्चुअली होता है क्या? व्हाट इज वेदरिंग or withering? It is breaking down or dissolution of the rocks. So rocks, they have been broken down into smaller particles by the process of weathering. The igneous rocks, they do not have much layers, and most of them consist of the silicates. And this igneous rocks, they are mostly found in the volcanic regions because the hot molten material, which is called as magma, found inside the earth crust, they are given out by the volcanic eruptions. Now, types of rocks based on their origin. So usually these rocks, they are compact and they have uses for the builders and sculptures. So based on the origin, there are two types of rocks: extrusive igneous rocks and the intrusive igneous rocks. Extrusive igneous rocks, they are formed by the cooling of the molten matter, whereas the intrusive igneous rocks, they are formed by the magma which solidifies inside the earth crust. When magma is brought to the surface through fissures are the openings, the volcanic eruptions, they solidify to form the rocks. And intrusive igneous rocks, they cool slowly to form coarse, textured, hard rocks with large crystals. So, extrusive igneous rocks are formed by the cooling of the molten magma which comes out through the fissures, the openings of the volcanoes, or either through the volcanic eruptions, whereas the intrusive igneous rocks, they are formed by the magma which solidifies within the earth crust and they become hard rocks in the form of the crystals. The extrusive igneous rocks, they are smooth, crystalline and finely grained rocks, also known as volcanic rocks. Example is the basalt. But when the magma, they solidifies below the earth crust to form different types of rocks, that comes under the intrusive igneous rocks, and there are various types of intrusive igneous rocks, as you can see, is batholiths, laccoliths, skills, dikes and rocks, etc. Now, based on the chemical composition, there are two categories of igneous rocks: acid igneous rocks and basic igneous rocks. Acid igneous rocks, they are made up of large crystals of quartz, feldspar and mica. They have high silica content, normally it ranges from 65 to 85%, and they lack iron and magnesium. Example is granite, and it is used as a building material. Basic igneous rocks, they have higher percentage of oxides and also the silica components. The silica components ranges from 40 to 60%, whereas in the acid igneous rocks, the silica content is from 65 to 80%. The basic igneous rocks, they are heavy and dark in color. Example is dolerite, basalt, etc. Now, intrusive igneous rocks, as I said, intrusive igneous rocks, they are formed of different types: batholiths, laccoliths, sills, dikes, rocks, etc. So we here will see the entire classification of the intrusive igneous rocks from the diagram as it is there. Now, this is the diagrammatic representation of the intrusive igneous rocks. As you can see in this diagram, this is batholiths, this is laccoliths. Now this is magma, this is a volcano, and from the volcanoes the lava has come out, and this is the lava flow, and this is the surface of the earth. Right now, this line, as you can see, this line is the earth crust. Now batholiths, they are deep seated intrusion. As you can see from the diagram below the earth crust, they are deep seated intrusion. They are dome shaped, they don't have a definite floor, and they are composed of granite. Laccoliths, lacos means cistern, whereas batholiths, it has come from a word bathos, which means depth. So laccoliths means lacos, word means cistern, and magma does not reach the crust of the earth. As you can see here, it has not reached the earth crust, laccoliths, and magma becomes solid just below the earth crust, and the upper surface is dome shaped. As batholiths, they have a dome shaped structure. In the same way, the laccoliths, they also have a dome shaped structure, and the bottom is flat, whereas the batholiths, they do not have a definite floor or definite bottom. Now sills, this is a sill. Dikes, here is a dike, here is a dike, this is a sills. Then necks. So sills, sometimes the magma flows between the layers of the rocks, making it more hard, and this layer of intrusive rock is called sill. Dikes, it is the magma when it is forced upwards to fill the vertical cracks or the fissures opening in the rocks, then it formed dikes. And next, it is a passage of extinct volcano filled with magma. So volcano which has become extinct, when it is filled with magma, it is called neck. Now there is a note for you people: when magma cools slowly at a great depth, forming large size crystals, the igneous rocks are called plutonic rocks. So plutonic rocks or plutonic igneous rocks are those rocks when magma they cools at a great depth, forming large size crystals. And the other note is when magma cools at intermediate depth, forming minor rocks like sills, dikes, they are called hypobyssal rocks. So there are two types of the igneous rocks formed, which is when when the magma cools at a greater depth, the rocks having large size crystals are called plutonic rocks, and the magma when cools at the intermediate depth, they form minor rocks and they are known as hypobyssal rock. So on the basis of the magma deposition at the distances, or you can say the depth, whether it is at the greater depth or intermediate depth. When it is at a greater depth, it is called plutonic rocks, and when it is at an intermediate depth, it will be called hypobasal rocks. Now we'll move on to the sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks, when the igneous rocks they are exposed, they undergo weathering, as a result of which they broke down. As I said, the igneous rocks they do not go the process of weathering, whereas the sedimentary rocks they undergo the process of weathering, as a result of which they are being broken down, and then they are changed into sedimentary rocks. Broken down rocks they are carried away by the forces of gradation, like they are carried away by the water into the rivers, oceans, etc., and they deposit at the base of the rivers and oceans to form the sediments. Sediments over sediments, that means layer over layer has been collected to form the sedimentary rocks. Now, what are the characteristics of the sedimentary rocks? First thing, they are formed from the minerals derived from the other rocks. So, they are formed from the minerals derived from the other rocks. Then, these rocks they contain fossils. 75% of the entire world is constituted by the sedimentary rocks. They are soft and layered, and then they are extending the landforms. So, first characteristic, they are formed from the other rocks. They contain fossils. They are constituting 75% of the globe. They are soft and layered as compared to the igneous rocks, which is very hard crystal form, and then they extend the landforms. There is a note for you people. The process that turns the loose sediments into rock is called the process of lithification. Now we'll learn what is the process of formation of the sedimentary rocks. The sedimentary rocks they are formed by the three process. The first one is the evaporation, the second is compaction, and the third one is cementation. The first step, that is evaporation, the water from the loose minerals is evaporated. As you all know, the process of evaporation means losing of the water content. So from the minerals, from the materials, the water is evaporated. In the next step, the sediments they piled up as a result of the weight of the piling. That means the sediments they are layered one over the other. So due to the weight of these layers, they squeezed up, the water content is being taken out, and then the hardness of the layers increases. And then the last step is the cementation, whereas the layered sediments they are compacted, they have been bonded together, as a result of which they turn into a sedimentary rock. Now we'll move on to the classification of the sedimentary rock. The sedimentary rocks they have been classified firstly on the basis of the formation. So on the basis of the formation, there are three types of rocks, sedimentary rocks: mechanically formed rocks, chemically formed rocks, and organically formed rocks. The mechanically formed rocks they contain of the fragments which comes out as a result of the breaking of the other rocks. These types of rocks include stone clay, sand, etc. Sediments are generally squeezed by overlying sediments and lower layers from rocks. So, as I said earlier, squeezing of the sedimented layers leads to the formation of the rocks. So lower layers, when they have been squeezed out due to the overlying sediments, they turned into rocks, and rocks, they are formed in layers which is called as stratified rocks. Chemically formed rocks, they are formed by the direct precipitation of the mineral. The accumulation takes place in lagoons and lakes, and they are compacted through evaporation, for example gypsum and rock salt. Rock salt is the salt which we also call the uh, this one fast salt, no? The salt which is used when people goes through fasting. Organically formed rocks, these contain remains of the dead plants and animals. Limestone is an example. So, a brief of the classification on the basis of formation: mechanically formed rocks, chemically and organically. Mechanically formed by the layering of the sediments. Chemically, they are formed by the direct precipitation of the minerals, and organically formed by the dead plants and animals' remains. Now, there's a note for you people. Rocks like peat, lignite, bituminous, anthracite, they are known as carbonaceous rocks because they have high content of the carbon. Other organically formed rocks are siliceous rocks. As the name itself implies, it has more of the silica component. And chalk is a carbonate rock. Formation of the rocks, they proceed in stages. First peat is formed, then lignite, and then coal. The product of the first stage is peat, which is used as a fuel. Lignite, it is the decomposed organic matter, and it is also used as a fuel. Coal, in which the carbon content is very high, and it is of two types, bituminous and anthracite. These are also used as a fuel for power generation. On the basis of agents of formation, there are four categories of sedimentary rocks: riverine rocks, lacustrine rocks, glacial rocks, and marine rocks. Riverine, they are formed by the alluvial deposits which is found by the sides of the rivers when the alluvial soil they deposits, and they form layers, sediments, they gives to the formation of the riverine rocks. Lacustrine rocks, they are found on the bed of the lake, so they are found inside the lake on the bed, that is the bottom region of the lake. Glacial rocks, they are formed by the glacial deposits in the form of debris or tilts. When the glacier they melts, the debris, that means the waste products which comes out through the glacial melting. So the debris they formed the glacial rocks, they are being collected, they are left behind, and then they are being collected to form the glacial rocks such as boulders, gravels, etc. And then marine rocks, I'm so sorry, there are five types, one more is there, aeolian rocks also. So marine rocks are found at the base of the ocean. As the name itself implies, marine, so they are formed at the ocean floor. There are two types, calcareous and the carbonaceous. Calcareous rocks, They are formed by the deposition of shells and skeletons of the sea organisms. So when the sea organisms they die, so they, after dying, they are settle down. They settle down at the bottom of the oceans. They deposit there, their skeleton, their shells deposit there, and they give rise to the formation of the calcareous rocks or calcareous marine rocks. The examples are corals, oysters, etc. They live on the ocean floor and extract calcium carbonate from the ocean water, such as chalk and limestone. Carbonaceous rocks, they are formed by the sea plants which remain buried for a long time. So, calcareous by the sea organism, carbonaceous by the remains of the buried plants, the plants which remains buried for a long time. These long preserved remains are known as fossils. So these came to be known as fossils. They are, after long processing, long sedimentation, they are being converted into coal, lignite and peat. And the last one is the Aeolian rocks. They are formed from the sand particles brought by wind. Aeolian, as the name itself implies, it means air, it means wind. So the rocks which is formed from the sand particles which is brought by the winds, they deposit one over the another and make the rocks, such as the example is loess. And the last category of rocks is the metamorphic rocks. Metamorphic rocks, the word is derived from metamorphos, which means change in the form. Metamorphosis generally refers to the alteration of the composition and the structure of the rock. So there are changes in the crust of the earth, there are changes in the internal parts of the earth, there are changes in the heat, there are changes in the temperature, pressure, etc., as a result of which there are alterations in the rocks, alterations in the form of change in the composition, alterations in the form of the structure. So the rocks were once igneous or sedimentary, which underwent change through physical and chemical process. So the igneous rocks or the sedimentary rocks, when they have gone change, they have gone changes in the composition, in the structure, as a result of the changes in the heat, in the pressure, they form metamorphic rocks. So the changes may also be in terms of the physical change or the chemical change. Now, metamorphic rocks, they are harder and more compact. Example, marble. As you can see, marble, they are used in the flooring almost in all the houses. They are very tough and hard rocks. So metamorphic rocks, they are harder and compact, and the example is the marble. They do not allow water to go through it. That is why they have an characteristic which is known as impermeable. So metamorphic rocks are impermeable and they do not have fossils. So fossils, or you can say having fossils in the rock structure, is a characteristic of the sedimentary rocks, not of the metamorphic rocks. So they do not have a fossil and they are formed due to change in the texture and the chemical composition of the existing rocks. So be it igneous rocks or sedimentary rocks, when they have gone change by the change in the temperature, pressure, or the change may be physical and chemical change, so they have formed metamorphic rocks. So the metamorphic rocks, they are formed as a result of the changes in the existing rocks. New minerals are formed in the process of the metamorphosis. Now we'll discuss the types of metamorphism. There are three types of metamorphism: thermal metamorphism, dynamic, and regional metamorphism. Thermal, as the name itself implies, transformation of the original rocks which takes place due to the changes in the temperature. Dynamic metamorphism occurs when the transformation takes place due to the change in the pressure. So thermal, change in the temperature; dynamic, change in the pressure. Minerals, they are arranged in a series of bands called foliation, and the example is marble. And the next one is your regional metamorphism. Regional metamorphism, as the name itself implies, due to mountain building process, the igneous rocks and the sedimentary rocks, they bury deep inside the earth crust, and due to the pressure which is overlying this, these rocks create heat, create change in the pressure, as a result of which the regional metamorphism takes place. So thermal metamorphism, change in the temperature; dynamic metamorphism, change in the pressure; and regional metamorphism, due to the mountain building pressure, the rocks, the sedimentary and the igneous rocks, they change in the chemical composition due to the temperature and the pressure both, and hence they form the metamorphic rocks as a result of the regional metamorphism. And the last thing to be discussed today with you people is the rock cycle. That means we have studied the three types of rocks. Now, what is the general process of the formation of the rocks? So, how the rocks are formed? So, rocks, they undergo cyclic transformation, right? So, one process generates the next step, that step generates to the other step, and then continuation takes place. This is an ongoing process in a cyclical order. As you can see, as I said, igneous rocks, they are the primary rocks. So extrusive igneous rocks and the intrusive igneous rocks. Extrusive igneous rocks, as a result of the changes in the temperature, pressure, the solar energy which the rock gets, they disintegrate, decompose, and dissolute to form the sediments, right? These sediments, they are formed, the temperature and the pressure is low, that these sediments, after facing the surface environment, they got buried, and due to the process of lithification, they form the sedimentary rocks. Now the sedimentary rocks, they face the deep environmental processes, that is the high temperature and pressure. Then they may either metamorphosize to give the metamorphic rocks, or they may encounter the radiogenic heat, melt, as a result of which the magma is released, and then due to the process of intrusion, they give rise to the intrusive igneous rocks. Now this intrusive igneous rocks, they also disintegrate, decompose, dissolute to form the sedimentation process, to undergo the sedimentation process to form the sediments. Now this intrusive igneous rocks, they are uncovered by the crystals or they undergo the processes of transformation, then they also leads to the formation of the sediments, and the process goes on like this. The both the rocks, the extrusive igneous rocks and the intrusive igneous rocks, after disintegration, decomposition or dissolution, they give rise to this metamorphic rocks, right? So this is the rock cycle. Extrusive, intrusive, forms sediments, and after forming sediments, layering of the sedimentation or layering of the sediments takes place, as a result of which the sedimentary rocks are formed. And sedimentary rocks, they undergo the process of metamorphosis to give rise to the metamorphic rocks, right? The intrusive rocks, they also undergo the process of metamorphism to give the metamorphic rocks. So this is the total cycle through which the primary rocks and the secondary rocks, they give rise to the formation of this metamorphic rocks. That's all today. Thank you, children. We'll be meeting soon in my next video, which again will be a very informative video for you people. So till then, thank you. Do like the channel, do like the video, subscribe to the channel and give a like button, and also don't forget to share amongst your friends. Thank you.